In the heart of East Africa lies a country of immense promise, a nation of vibrant culture, innovation, and resilience. Kenya, a symbol of progress and democracy on the continent. Yet beneath its glass towers, its expanding highways, and its celebrated tech hubs, lies a reality few dare to confront. Behind the speeches of reform and unity, behind the colorful campaigns and national prayers, a quiet machinery of power has thrived for decades, one that has shaped who wins, who loses, and who stays invisible. This is not a story of one man. It is a story of a system, of a republic built on ideals and captured by its own elites. This is the story of how Kenya's power elite captured the nation. To understand Kenya's present, one must first understand its history, not as a series of dates and names, but as a continuous struggle for control. When the Union Jack was lowered in 1963 and the flag of independent Kenya was raised, it marked not the end of colonial power, but its transformation. Land, wealth, and privilege, the instruments once held by the British, were not returned to the people. They were transferred to a new class, the political elite, the educated few, the inheritors of the colonial state. For decades, the dream of Uhuru, true freedom, remained elusive for the millions who tilled the land and lived in the shadows of the capital. Nairobi grew, glittered, and globalized, while the rural heartlands waited for the promises of independence to arrive. The machinery of control evolved, becoming more sophisticated. Patronage replaced policy. Loyalty became currency. The first post-independence governments built networks that rewarded allies and punished dissenters. The colonial logic of divide and rule never disappeared. It simply changed language, changed uniforms, changed names. By the late 20th century, Kenya had mastered the art of political choreography. Elections came and went. Parties rose and fell. Yet the faces of power remained remarkably familiar. Political dynasties emerged, some born of the independence struggle, others born of money. The lines between public service and personal enrichment blurred until they became indistinguishable. The story of Kenya's political elite is not written in speeches or manifestos, but in contracts, tenders, and offshore accounts. It is told through grand projects that begin with fanfare and end in silence, through hospitals without medicine, schools without teachers, and young graduates without jobs. For many Kenyans, politics has become theater, a performance staged every 5 years, promising change while ensuring continuity. But how did this system entrench itself so deeply? The answer lies in 3 foundations: land, ethnicity, and money. Land in Kenya is not just soil. It is history, identity, and power. From the days of colonial dispossession to modern speculation, the ownership of land has defined who belongs and who decides. After independence, large tracts were redistributed not to the landless, but to those with access, the new power brokers who became landlords of the nation's future. Ethnicity, meanwhile, became the invisible hand that shaped politics. In a country of over 40 ethnic groups, leaders learned early that the fastest route to loyalty was tribal allegiance. Political parties morphed into ethnic vehicles, and every election became not a contest of ideas, but a census of identity. The elite perfected this game, dividing the Yauri masses to unite their own interests. And then came money, the ultimate unifier, Kenya's economy grew rapidly after liberalization in the 1990s. Foreign investment flowed in. Urban centers expanded and a new middle class began to emerge. But much of this prosperity remained uneven. The same networks that controlled politics also controlled business. Procurement systems became gateways for enrichment. Public offices became instruments of private gain. Corruption, once whispered about, became normalized. It was no longer shocking, it was expected. From petty bribes to billion-shilling scandals, the system evolved to protect itself. Whistleblowers vanished. Investigations stalled. Accountability became performance art. Yet even in this system, resilience endured. Civil society groups, journalists, and activists refused to be silenced. They exposed truths, often at great personal cost, keeping alive the idea that Kenya could still reclaim its promise. Still, for the ordinary Kenyan, the matatu driver, the small-scale farmer, the youth with a degree but no job, the question remained, why does so much wealth create so little prosperity? To answer that, one must look at how Kenya's economy was designed to serve its elite. The post-liberalization era brought privatization, deregulation, and international aid, all in the name of modernization. But behind the language of reform was the reality of concentration. Industries once owned by the state were sold to well-connected insiders. Natural resources, from tea to titanium, were managed for export, not empowerment. The global institutions praised Kenya as a regional success story, but at home inequality widened. In Nairobi, a skyline of gleaming towers rose, while in Kibera, families shared tin shacks and open drains. The same internet cables that brought fintech revolutions also delivered global scams and disinformation campaigns. The same highways that connected ports to cities also became symbols of debt and dependency. Kenya's elite, ever adaptive, learned to speak the language of progress. They wore the suits of technocrats, spoke at international forums, and courted investors with visions of transformation. But beneath the rhetoric, the structure remained unchanged, a pyramid where opportunity flowed upward, not downward. Elections offered the illusion of choice. Political coalitions rebranded themselves as saviors of the people. Yet behind closed doors, deals were struck, deals that ensured no matter who won, the system survived. By the time Kenya entered the 21st century's second decade, something had shifted. The young generation, tech-savvy, connected, restless, began to see through the illusion. Social media became the new parliament of the streets. Hashtags replaced rallies. Memes replaced manifestos. The call for transparency grew louder, and yet the system adapted again. The language of the elite became the language of reform. Anti-corruption campaigns were announced by those under investigation. Digital innovation became a tool for control as much as liberation. Surveillance expanded, and the line between national security and political security blurred. The machinery of elite capture is not sustained by brute force alone. It is sustained by hope, the hope that maybe next time will be different, that this leader will be the one to change it all. But as long as institutions remain hollow, as long as public service is tied to personal interest, hope becomes a tool, not a solution. Kenya stands today at a crossroads. It is Africa's Silicon Savannah, yet millions live without reliable power. It leads in innovation, yet lags in equality. It champions democracy, yet battles disillusionment. To understand how Kenya's power elite captured the nation is to see how power itself evolved, from colonial conquest to corporate capture, from political loyalty to digital manipulation. And so, the question is no longer who rules Kenya. The question is, who truly owns Kenya? The question of ownership in Kenya is not philosophical, it is painfully real. Ownership defines power. Ownership defines opportunity. And in Kenya, ownership is concentrated not just in wealth, but in information, access, and influence. Behind every major project, every lucrative contract, every legislative reform, there is a network, an alliance of politicians, business magnates, bureaucrats, and foreign partners. They move quietly, often invisibly, shaping the direction of policy long before it reaches the parliament floor. It is here that Kenya's elite capture becomes complete when democracy functions as a stage performance rather than a mechanism of accountability. During every election season, the nation vibrates with color and noise, flags waving, songs echoing through villages and cities alike. Candidates promise transformation, unity, and rebirth. Yet, time and again, the pattern repeats. After the votes are counted, the old networks return to the driver's seat. For the ordinary Kenyan, this cycle breeds exhaustion. Hope becomes transactional. Change becomes negotiable, and yet, amid this fatigue, a quiet defiance grows. Across Nairobi's slums, in Mombasa's ports, and deep in the farmlands of Eldoret, young Kenyans are starting to ask the forbidden question, who benefits? Because the truth is this, Kenya is not a poor country. It is a rich country managed poorly. Its resources, its human capital, its creativity, all of it has been captured by a small circle of privilege. Look at the budgets, and the story reveals itself. Year after year, billions are allocated to development, infrastructure, and social welfare. But between the promise and the people, the money evaporates, lost in a maze of procurement loopholes, inflated tenders, and ghost projects. A bridge that should cost $2 billion costs $12. A hospital that should serve thousands remains half-built. And the same politicians who presided over these failures return to campaign, offering the same promises, wrapped in new slogans. This is not incompetence, it is design. The elite capture works through carefully maintained dependence. The poor depend on the state for survival. The state depends on the elite for funding. And the elite depend on the poor for legitimacy. It is a triangle of convenience, perfected over decades. Every institution that could hold the elite accountable, the judiciary, the media, the ethics commissions, has been strategically weakened, co-opted, or intimidated. Independent voices are tolerated, but only within boundaries. Step too far, and you vanish into silence or into exile. Yet, despite all this, Kenya's story is not one of despair. It is a story of struggle and of awakening. In the mid-2010s, a new wave of activism emerged. Young professionals, digital journalists, and civil society groups began to pierce the veil of elite impunity. They mapped corruption scandals, traced offshore accounts, and revealed how billions in public funds were hidden abroad while schools lacked desks and hospitals lacked beds. They called it #activism, but in reality, it was something deeper, the digital resurrection of Kenya's civic conscience. Movements like Occupy Parliament, Ours as We Are Not Broken, and Switch Off KPLC weren't just social media trends. They were signals that the people had begun to understand that their anger, once scattered, could be focused. For decades, the system had relied on silence, on fatigue, on tribal divisions, on fear. But in the age of information, silence became harder to enforce, and yet, even as this consciousness grew, so did the sophistication of the state's response. New laws were passed under the banner of national security, granting the government broader powers to monitor communications, restrict protests, and regulate online content. Dissent was reframed as disloyalty. Whistleblowing became espionage. The narrative of unity was weaponized, not to heal divisions, but to suppress dissent. Kenya's elite understood something crucial, that control in the 21st century does not require censorship, only noise. By flooding the public sphere with propaganda, misinformation, and endless political drama, the truth became drowned out. People grew numb, unable to separate fact from fiction, and so the system endured, not through violence, but through distraction. Still, every system, no matter how entrenched, carries the seeds of its own undoing. The cracks are visible. The economy, weighed down by debt and mismanagement, struggles to sustain itself. The youth, educated yet underemployed, refuse to be pacified by speeches. And the international community, once enamored with Kenya's image of stability, has begun to see the fractures behind the facade. The elite may own the headlines, but they cannot own the hunger, the frustration, the yearning for fairness that grows each day among ordinary people. In the heart of Nairobi's informal settlements, there is innovation that no government has planned, from community savings groups to local digital startups, from youth-led cleanup drives to independent content creators exposing truth. This is the other Kenya, the Kenya that exists. Beyond the control of the elite, it is the Kenya that refuses to accept that corruption is culture. It is the Kenya that still believes the flag means something. It is the Kenya that dreams, even when denied. But transformation requires more than outrage. It requires structure. For decades, Kenya's institutions were designed to serve those in power, not the people. Reforming them means confronting interests too powerful to be challenged by words alone. It demands civic courage and collective will. History offers examples of how systems like this fall, not through revolutions of fire, but revolutions of awareness. When citizens begin to see the patterns, the illusion weakens. When they understand that poverty is not fate, but policy, change begins. The challenge, then, is not to find a savior, but to rebuild the system itself. For true democracy to take root, Kenya must move beyond the politics of personality and tribe. It must build institutions that outlast individuals. It must teach its youth that leadership is not inheritance, it is service. It must restore trust, not through speeches, but through justice, because corruption is not just theft of money, it is theft of hope. Every stolen shilling is a stolen dream. Every rigged tender is a stolen hospital. Every manipulated election is a stolen future, and yet hope persists. Across the continent, new movements are emerging, young Africans demanding accountability, technology reshaping transparency, and journalism defying intimidation. Kenya, with its deep democratic tradition and entrepreneurial spirit, stands poised to lead this awakening, but only if it dares to confront its reflection. The path forward will not be easy. The elite will not surrender power willingly. They will adapt, disguise, and resist. But history has shown that no system built on exclusion can last forever. The generation rising now, connected, informed, unafraid, may not have wealth, but it has something far greater, perspective. They have seen how power is abused, how narratives are manufactured, how promises are betrayed. They carry the knowledge that democracy is not given, it is taken back. And so, Kenya's story is still being written. The question is, who will write the next chapter? Will it be the same names recycled through politics, or the millions of nameless citizens who have decided that silence is no longer an option? The world watches Kenya, not just as a nation, but as a mirror for Africa's struggle between democracy and dynasty, between progress and capture. For every scandal exposed, a new movement is born. For every promise broken, a new generation takes note, and perhaps that is the true revolution. Not a sudden upheaval, but a slow, relentless reclaiming of truth, because power ultimately belongs to those who refuse to stop believing that their voice matters. When that belief becomes collective, no elite can contain it. So the story of Kenya's capture is not just a tragedy, it is a lesson. A reminder that nations do not fail overnight. They are slowly drained by those who mistake power for ownership. But the cure lies in the same place the disease began, in the hands of the people. As the sun rises over the great Rift Valley, as matatus fill the roads of Nairobi, as farmers tend to their fields and children walk to school, Kenya endures, vibrant, flawed, hopeful, and perhaps, in that daily endurance, there lies the quiet revolution that no elite can capture. Because nations are not owned by their rulers, they are owned by those who still believe they can be better.